I remember 7 a.m. on election day, 100 people show up into our office, and you could imagine what kind of crowd that is at 7 a.m. with our team, making sure everyone gets mobilized. But it was no easy feat, and really just tapping into the special ballot, making sure people vote was a huge difference maker in our campaign and making the impossible possible.
Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special treat, not just for you, but for us as well. Today, we have one of the campaign managers of the local candidates that actually won their riding for the Conservatives, Jonathan Stathakos. He is Ned's campaign manager and is going to be continuing to work for Ned as a director on his team in Ottawa. And this is almost a Cinderella story, because Ned Kuruc was unsuccessful in the 2021 election, was bound and determined to turn the riding blue, the riding of Hamilton East Stony Creek, and he worked tirelessly for the last 4 years with Jonathan next to him, in front of him, behind him, just guiding everything. And right before the 2025 election, 338 Canada was saying you had a better chance of winning the lottery than turning the riding blue. And the guy who made it possible, Jonathan Stathakos, is here with us today. So Jonathan, welcome to Northern Perspective.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate you letting me be on your show today. And it's been one heck of a journey, and I'm excited to share some of the details on how we made the impossible possible.
Well, and that's really kind of the theme of even the Canadian Promise right now. It feels like an impossibility for so many people, but there are people that are working hard every day across this country, whether they know it or not, to actually make that possible. So why don't we start way back at the beginning? You are not an old guy. How did you get into politics, and how did you get into Conservative politics?
Oh, that's a phenomenal question. And funny enough, I was always a Conservative, but I never knew how to get involved. And at the time, this was during COVID, I was working at a factory, just finished my undergrad at McMaster University, and I was laid off due to the supply chain challenges. And I'm sitting at home one day, waiting for my call back to go and work. And I see a Facebook advertisement, and it was for, at the time, a local candidate named Ned Kuruc for the riding of Hamilton East Stony Creek. And I'm sitting at home, and it's for a Zoom call. I see it's at 3:30. It was about 1 o'clock that day. And I'm like, well, I got nothing better to do. And this is coming from me, a guy who would watch Question Period every day, was always a Conservative. And I said, seems interesting. I click on the advertisement, I hop on the Zoom call, and I really like this Ned guy. I got interested in what he had to say, messaged him on Facebook, met up with him later in the week to go door-to-door canvassing, stuck it out with him through that election. Unfortunately, we didn't win that time, but that's what got me hooked. And I stayed in touch with Ned. Eventually, the 2022 leadership came about, helped him out on that, and a million different pivots during the time in between then and the federal election. But I ended up in the position of being actually managing his campaign, which was a surreal experience. And we managed to get across the finish line during this process.
And what was it about Ned in that first meeting that really struck you? Because, when I talk to people about interviewing for any position, I try and remind them, as much as that person is interviewing you for that position, you need to be interviewing them to ensure that you're going to click and this is going to be somebody that you want to work for. So what was it about Ned that kind of grabbed you?
That's a great question. I would say Ned is Ned, and you guys know Ned, and he's no different than you and me. He's fighting for the same things we are, right? He has a family, he has children. I myself, I'm not married or have kids, but he wants a better future for Canada. And what he wanted in 2021 is almost identical to what he wanted on the second go around. And that's for a better future. There's a lot of people struggling right now. We knocked on over 100,000 doors in the last election that just passed. And what we heard at every door was the same thing. People are concerned about the future. And it's not just about, oh, my kids, what are they going to do 10 years from now? It was much deeper than that. It was, how do we get to tomorrow? People living paycheck to paycheck. counting every nickel and dime, concerned about tomorrow, the day after, a year from now, and so on and so forth. And that's something that drew me to both working on his campaign in the volunteer capacity and then taking that next step, but also sticking around. There's that common cause that all brings us to the table, working hard. It's no easy feat knocking on 100,000 doors, and it takes a lot of people to pull that off.
Well, and one of the things that we'd heard throughout the last couple of years was that there was a mentality that Pierre Poilievre was instilling in his MPs and his candidates that we haven't won anything yet, don't get too comfortable. And that was even when the Conservatives were up at 47%. And the Liberals had dropped to, I think, historic level, I think one poll by Angus Reid in the fall was at 16%. And we kind of all know how that flipped. So how was the team, as you guys were continually working on this, because Ned wasn't an incumbent MP, he was working his butt off to make himself known throughout the community and to gain support. So how was that roller coaster from the last election into, the high blue polling, into the low blue polling, or not really low? That's the bizarre thing about this last election, is it would have been a Conservative majority in any other election, but the crazy swing with the polls, and even going into election week, the polling saying that you had no chance of winning. What was that like in terms of the team and the morale and the mentality?
Well, if we're going to turn back the hands of time, even dating before when Ned became the candidate again, in the nomination process, taking no day for granted, you only have so much time before the next election. At the time, we had a huge runway. That was a huge factor in our success. But even going through the nomination process, working hard, signing up members, going anywhere and everywhere, meeting with people, hearing their stories. Then when Ned officially became the candidate, which we were very fortunate, Ned was one of the very first people nominated as a candidate. And from that moment, we never took a day for granted. He became the candidate during the winter of January of 2024. And from that day, we upped the pace, because at that point, you're now the candidate. There's different tasks you have to complete. And you guys have seen the super canvases we put on, for example, bring a bunch of people to the table, uniting everyone. And those are always a blast. And you've seen just the kind of crowds and the atmosphere. It's very magnetic. You want to be a part of it, and it's a blast. And if you remember the super canvas we did with Deputy Leader Tim Uppel and MP Jazzraj, that was a blast. We had so many people there in the park, and that whole day was phenomenal, even the tour stops before the super canvas. But it's magnetic. Everyone's high energy. Everyone's excited to be there, and everyone's ready to work hard for that cause. And again, taking no day for granted. And I remember Pierre had done what was called the National Door Knocking Day. It was, I believe, April 4th of last year. And we assembled a huge team, multiple shifts throughout the day. And we knocked on, I want to say, almost 5,000 doors that day. And we weren't thinking about winning the day or anything like that. We were just thinking about reaching as many people as possible, hearing the stories at the door. And it's funny, at the end of that day, we got a phone call from the team at HQ saying, hey, BC's still going because of the time difference, but you guys are so far ahead in the lead. And we're like, what lead? What do you mean lead? We're just knocking on doors. It's the National Door Knocking Day, right? Like,
yeah, get out there, get to work.
Yeah, I didn't think it was like a competition or anything, but they told us, they're like, you're so far ahead. You guys hit so many doors today. Like, you guys brought it home. And, the saying, bring it home. And that's what we did that day. And from there on, we just kept going. Always momentum, always working hard, because look at what's at stake. People are struggling right now. People are hurting. No matter what demographic you look at, there's something going on, whether on the affordability side of things, which is, as a young person, I maintain as the most important issue. If you're a young person looking into the workforce, get a job, hopefully buy a home one day, start a family, your chances of that happening are very slim right now, especially here in Hamilton. Housing prices have tripled in the past 10 years. Mortgages quadrupled. If you talk to someone in their 20s, that's menacing, that's terrifying. How do you conquer that? I don't know if it's possible right now. And that's a story we hear at the doors. And you take that to someone a bit older, for example, family, someone in their 30s, maybe newly married, has children, newborn. They have their own set of challenges. And no matter where you look, someone's dealing with something, an issue of some sort that didn't exist 10 years ago under the previous conservative government. And for that reason, we kept on fighting. Can't take a day for granted. No chance.
And other than brute force, because the Hamilton East Stony Creek riding was known as one of the hardest working teams around Canada, which I know you guys took immense pride in and absolutely should have. Over and above that, what do you think got it over the finish line? How did your team win a 1% probability of winning this election, and you turn that into I think it was 1,500 vote lead, something like that at the end?
Exactly. We won by a very close margin like that. And it's funny you mentioned the brute force. A good buddy of mine had said, you guys brute force your way into Ottawa. Oh, and I said to him, like, you're not wrong. Like, keep it short and sweet. Hard work is what it takes, but it's a little bit more than that. One, we had a phenomenal team. I got to give credit to all our volunteers and everyone who showed up, not just during the election, but beforehand. A lot of good people on the team who not only kept my head above water, but, they kept coming back. And a big part of that was making the campaign a place where it's a revolving door, where people come back and not one and done.
And a lot of young people too, I think that was so key for you guys, because the young people bring that energy. And shout out to Logan, 17-year-old Logan, who knows so much already at 17. And that young man is going places, but so many young people came out. Was that young energy a big factor for you guys?
Oh, absolutely. And during the whole process, dating back before the writ had dropped, having all the young legs involved, we made a big effort connecting with all the campus clubs across the GTA. The young people are the future of our party. They work extremely hard. They know what's at stake and they're passionate. And it's very important that we supported them, right? They want to get more people involved and they're recruiting people all the time. Even for me, after I finished my undergrad, I took a year off of school and I went back to school and I went to TMU. I founded a new campus club. At the time, it was called the TMU Tories. They eventually rebranded a bit and now they're the TMU Conservatives. And those guys did a phenomenal job at growing the club. We started with like 20 people. They're at over 80 members, if not in the hundreds now. And it was a big passionate project of mine because we created something that didn't exist. And it became an outlet for people to flock to and be a part of something. And you take those, to say there's 100 people there, all the doors they've knocked at the different forms of volunteering, phone calls, attending events, recruiting new people. And now you extrapolate that over the other campus clubs because young people are getting involved. They're the difference maker in making sure that they stay engaged. And they were a huge help in all our super canvases prior to the election. But even during the writ, having them come out. And I really lean on the hard work that we did prior to the writ because Ned did a phenomenal job of getting out there, letting people meet him, speaking to them. On the data side of things, people often say, well, there may not be a point in door knocking a year and a half out from an election. I argue it is important because the candidate should get out there. He shouldn't, if you're nominated as the candidate a year and a half out, it doesn't mean you could just sit around at home and, just scroll on Twitter and, anything like that. No, you got to work hard and, knocking on over 50,000 doors prior to the election, handing out those lit pieces, talking to people, hearing their stories. Even if at the door they're not supporting us, eventually when we get to them, maybe the second, third, or fourth time, their minds can change. And at that point, when we get back to them during the election, we're a familiar face. We're not some stranger at the door.
Well, especially when Chad Collins never showed up. The only time he actually came by was one time where he knocked on our door. And it wasn't even him; it was his staff. That's
no.
Fine.
Well, usually they send the staff ahead of time, and if they want to talk to the MP, then they'll send the MP.
But we hadn't seen Chad Collins in 6 years being here.
To be fair, though, Chad Collins was not in this riding until recently because we were affected by their boundary change.
But they knew that it was going to change. To your point, get out there,
Exactly.
and not because, and to your point, year and a half out, especially in a minority government, you don't know how long this government is going to last. So you can't assume that you're going to have a year and a half. It could fall, the next sitting session. So you just don't know.
Yeah, exactly. And, from our perspective, we were knocking in the new part of the riding way before the election. The riding's the riding. And we knew that when the election gets called, we're going to go under those boundaries. And, Upper Stony Creek, that territory was up for grabs. And we didn't take that for granted. And the stories we were hearing up here, people wanted change. And that was a story across Hamilton, East Stony Creek change. The people that live in this riding, they're hurting, they want to change. And you extrapolate that across the whole country, that appetite was there. And it's reflected in the 40 some odd percent that we got at the national level. And here in Hamilton, East Stony Creek, that story at the doors, that's what got us across the finish line, because they knew that we were fighting for them, that we wanted to bring the change and get back to where we should be. 10 years ago under Stephen Harper, don't want to say it was the golden ages, but it was some form of that. 10 years ago, I was much younger. I didn't have any facial hair or anything of that sort. But I remember working my first job, and minimum wage would get you some pretty cool things, new pair of Jordans or the new video game and whatever the heck I was into back then, going to concerts and stuff like that. But now times are way different.
All that's luxury item now.
Oh, it's fantasy at this point. No matter how hard you work, you never get ahead. Really, if you work, some people, they work so hard that they actually fall behind just because there's no fruit to bear from their work. They get penalized from it. And it shouldn't be the case.
So the Liberal leadership race takes hold. Carney, is anointed the leader of the Liberal Party and Prime Minister. He calls an election. What was the mentality on March 22nd and then March 23rd when he called the election? Or did the mentality change at all with the team?
Well, I remember when they called the election, we were in the campaign office I think we had a kickoff or something, either the day before or whatever. And I was with Ned, and I look at my phone and like, Ned, look at this. They called the election. He's like, oh, nice. We got the ball. The ball started rolling. But I will say though, one of the things that really did help us when they called the election is we had all this data from the year and a half prior. And going into the election, we already knew, say 15,000 of who our supporters were. And day one of the campaign, the number one question is, are we getting our people out to vote? Because one of the key factors to our success is we were really pushing, making sure people went to the returning office to vote early via the special ballot. There's multiple ways to vote. As you guys know, obviously election day, mail-in ballots, the advanced voting, home visits, but you can also vote at the returning office. And fortunately for us, Hamilton, East Stony Creek, it's not one of those crazy ridings where it's, 10 hours from one end to the other. For the most part, you can get to the returning office within under 15 minutes, depending where you are in the riding. And we managed to get a couple thousand of our supporters out via the returning office, which
that's huge.
Oh, absolutely. And a big part of campaigning is making sure you get out your supporters, get out the vote. There's no point in spending a year and a half, almost 2 years talking to people, finding out if they're a supporter or not, if you never actually get them out to vote. Because at that point, the work was pointless. You need to get your people out to vote. And the special ballot was key. We didn't want to wait to the last minute to get a hold of people when the opportunity exists now. And at that point, that was a huge focus. And we had a bunch of different tactics approaching the special ballot from 10 different ways, and then pivoting to the advanced voting weekend, which is very important, and whittling that number down until E-Day. I'd rather have to go to, say, 10,000 households than 13,000 households on E-Day. Makes sense, right? It's a numbers game at the end of the day. And we did a very, very good job of doing that. And by locking in those voters, we freed up resources for election day, which is no easy feat to pull off. I remember 7 a.m. on election day, 100 people show up into our office. And you can imagine what kind of crowd that is at 7 a.m. with our team, making sure everyone gets mobilized. But it was no easy feat in really just tapping into the special ballot making sure people vote was a huge difference maker in our campaign and making the impossible possible.
So talk us through election night, because as much as the hard work went into it, no doubt Ned, like many of the other candidates, is looking at those polls. It's like eating away at the back of his head. Talk us through what that was like watching the results start to roll in.
Oh, it was very surreal, scary at times too, because polls closed at 9:30 and we weren't getting results in until a couple hours later. And it wasn't until just before 2 a.m. that we actually realized we won. We had most of the polls come in and we were up by a pretty good margin, but we were waiting on the advance vote to come in. And over 20,000 people voted early during the advance voting weekend. And so when you have that many voters, you can't just call it right away. You have to get that result. We get that number in and we're still in the lead. We were missing about 8 different polls by the time we realized we won. But by then you do some math and you realize, we'd have to do pretty bad in these polls to lose. And by then we had called it and realized we had won. And it was a very surreal journey. For me personally, I've been with Ned for, I want to say, at least 4 years at this point. He was the one that got me into politics, and to see it through with him. And the journey's not over yet, but it was one heck of a moment, that's for sure. And it felt good.
What is next for Ned? Obviously, I don't even know if he expected to to be in Ottawa now, but now he is. He's going to be sworn in as an official member of Parliament, and I think we're all just so happy for him to see that hard work really pay off. Where does he go from here? Where do you go from here?
It's a great question. I mean, the journey's not over. We're not in government yet. And Canadians are still struggling, and Ned's going to fight for them, and I'll be alongside him on this journey because it's not over yet. Across the board, affordability is a big issue. Here in Hamilton, we're still getting rocked by crime. Shootings almost every day at this point. It's terrifying. It's sad, and that needs to change. And on all fronts, there's a lot of stuff that needs to get fixed, and we got to keep fighting for that. We're going to stand up for the people of Hamilton East Stony Creek, and we're going to continue that. And I look at the work Pierre Poilievre has done over the past couple of years and during the writ, during the election. And I think a big part of his success is he addressed what I like to call the 3-word problem, where for a long while, Conservatives had a bit of an identity crisis, whereas the Liberals for the past 10 years, every single thing they did, they were able to do under 3 words: diversity, equity, and inclusion. And for us, on the flip side, we didn't really have our 3 words to define what we're doing. What are the legs we're standing on? And I look at what Pierre Poilievre stands for, and a big reason why he resonated with so many Canadians, and he still does, is because you look at his policies, and I observe them, and I think they fall under 3 words: freedom, affordability, and opportunity. And those largely address the issues Canadians are facing.
I think a lot of Canadians felt very dismayed at the results of the most current election. And I think a lot of people have lost hope. So how can we pick that hope back up? What can we do? What can Canadians do to make sure that everything turns out the way that we want it to? I mean, we're not just going to curl up in a ball and say, okay, we lost the election, that's it. Like, what's next? What do we do?
Well, that's a great question, right? We work tremendously hard here in Hamilton East Stony Creek and across the country, and it's a shame to see the outcome. The journey's not over. Still a lot of work ahead of us. I always tell people, get involved. Figure out where your local EDA is, who to contact. Go on conservative.ca, punch in your postal code, figure out how to get involved. And it's always a great time volunteering. You guys have seen the super campuses. We have a great group of people who come out. And no matter where, we get people that come out from Toronto, Niagara Falls. People flock to Hamilton East Stony Creek because it's a great time and great group of people. And, we're very welcoming. And it's always a blast having so many people out. But it helps make a difference. It's at the local level. You need to get involved if you want to help make a difference. Knocking on doors, it's not the most fancy of tasks, but it's very important. That's how you get the job done. And so I stress to everyone, if you want to get involved, start volunteering. It's a great opportunity. That's how I started. I was a volunteer. I knocked on thousands of doors before I ever got a fancy title or anything like that. And at times it still feels so real to me that I had any sort of title. I'm just a common guy I'm the son of a fry cook and a loving, hardworking mother, who was on disability. I didn't grow up in the fanciest of conditions. I just worked hard. That's my life story. I don't have any fancy background or anything handed to me. Just, tearing the soles off of a bunch of shoes, knocking until, my knuckles bruise a bit, but that's how the game goes. Just hard work. And that's the story of Hamilton East Stony Creek. And to anyone that wants to get involved, please do. It's a blast. You'll meet so many great people, like-minded people, and it's always, 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 always a great time.
Well, and to kind of circle right back to where this started, I think any future candidates that are, have ambitions of winning an impossible to win riding, you guys have laid out a blueprint. Get involved, start now. Assume the election is tomorrow. Start now and get out there, win that nomination, and get to work. Because if you spend the next couple of years getting out there and putting your face out there, being recognizable, just like Ned and the team did, you guys have demonstrated that 1%, that's all the chance you need to win the next election. If you put in the work and you show your face and you demonstrate to Canadians that as bad as things get, I'm going to be working my butt off for you, and we'll continue to do so. So I think it's a great story and a great testament and a great template for anyone else who is serious about running for their community.
Absolutely, I agree. By all intents and purposes, Hamilton East Stony Creek was a riding that was deemed safe. We had the 1%, less than 1% chance of winning, and we still pulled it off through hard work. And again, volunteers are everything. Start early, recruit volunteers, treat them like gold, because that's what they're worth. They're the best people. They're the backbone of your campaign. Get creative. Get out that vote when the writ drops during the election. Don't waste any day. Make sure you get your people out to vote. Get creative with it. Use technology to your advantage. One of the things that got us over the finish line was rethinking how to canvass, for example. You guys have seen the canvas maps we created. When you go out to door knock, the maps were a huge difference maker. And I didn't use any fancy technology, any AI. I took screenshots off of Apple Maps, drew some arrows on Canva, nothing fancy, it's not like a Picasso art piece by any means, but something as simple as that, speeding up and getting efficient at the doors. We were knocking twice as many doors per hour as the next campaign because we were that efficient. Using all these tools to our advantage, that's what makes the difference. You stack us up against any other campaign, we're operating on a different level. Efficiency is key, and bringing on the best people possible is what makes the difference.
Well, and I think that's an opportunity for the Conservative Party nationally as well. Look at what the different campaigns did well. Look at some of these ridings that, elevated their game to another level, and then distribute that across the country. Take the successes from one riding and put it out to the other ridings, and that way, like rising tide lifts all ships, right? So I think that's a big lesson. I think they need to do a forensic postmortem on the election, what went well, what didn't, and put those lessons into play starting now.
Absolutely, I agree. And I don't have any gray in my hair, and so there is a lack of experience on my end a bit. And one of the things that helped me tremendously was leaning on the expertise around me. I had a phenomenal group of people I was able to work with, and tons of people who, if I gave them a call just to pick their brain and get a different perspective on things, they would pick up. And I'm very fortunate to have that kind of team around me, and just a network of a wealth of wisdom, which I'm very fortunate to have, because I may not have all the answers, but I'm going to work real hard to find it.
And what was something, or maybe a few things, that you learned during this campaign, or even just since you've been working with Ned?
A big thing would be that I can't do everything myself. And again, leaning on the team.
Delegation.
Absolutely. And we pulled off a campaign unlike any other. I would compare it, honestly, to a by-election level campaign where we had so many people, so many moving parts, where trust is very important. Trusting your people, working hard, letting them succeed. I always say, for Ned to succeed, I need to succeed. And for me to succeed, I need my people to. And that's what we did. I made sure that the opportunity was there for everyone to do the best they can and to hit home runs. And that's what we did. And you can see that we pulled off the impossible, less than 1% chance. You know, how else do you do that? It's bringing the best out of people and outworking the room.
Jonathan, it's been wonderful having you on the show. Thank you for sharing your experience, and thank you for continuing to work for Ned and working hard for Canadians in Ottawa.
Well, thank you for the opportunity and letting me appear on your podcast. And again, I want to thank you guys. You guys are doing phenomenal work across Hamilton, East Stony Creek, and across Canada. This support for you guys is there, and people love your podcast. And I'm going to keep continuing to listen in because I enjoy it. My family does, especially my uncle. He's a big supporter. And so I'm looking forward to the next one, and I'll be tuning in.